Welcome to Built, Trusted, Chosen, the podcast for leaders and marketers in trades and construction, hosted by Wes Towers from Uplift 360.
Okay, g'day Cameron. It's fantastic to have you on the show. You were introduced by a colleague, a friend, mutual friend. So great to connect and learn more about what you're up to. But just briefly, if you want to tell people who you are, what you're up to, we'll unpack it, of course, as we make progress. But just set the foundation. Tell us who you are.
Well, thanks, Wes. Great to be on. I'm a commercial specialist buyer's agent. So I source and buy property for people that want to invest in or inhabit with their own businesses commercial property, be it office, be it retail space, be it industrial space, whatever.
Yeah, love it. And it's obviously a topical moment, certainly for our Australian audience with everything changing. And obviously, there's people looking, where do we put our money now? And commercial property, it's certainly popping up in my feeds as a viable option, even more so than it was probably pre-budget with people looking for the cash flow positive properties and how that all plays out. What are you getting inquiries on lately? Have you seen anything shift since the crazy budget was announced?
Yeah. My it's funny. The budget was announced, was it a Tuesday night about 3 weeks ago now? And my inquiry dropped off a cliff. The phone went dead for probably 4 days. I might have had a call or two or an email or something by the end of the week. But the following week and up until now, it continues to roar. Lots and lots of people particularly with one or two or more, but lots of ones and twos, residential investments that are going, I was just about to buy another residential investment, but I don't think I will now because commercial property is really not affected by all those rulings because generally speaking, the income is so much stronger and quite closely tied usually to the cost of borrowed capital, i.e. at the moment, investment funds are about 6.5% and yields are 6 to 6.5%. There are different deals that are above that are a bit risky and there are different deals that are below that are a bit safer, in inverted commas, or perceived to be either riskier or safer. But generally speaking, most of the stuff I'm seeing, it stays pretty well closely pegged to the cost of borrowed capital. Therefore, whereas residential stuff is 2, 3, 4%, depending on where you are, and that's gross. You still got to pay out all your outgoings. Whereas the commercial stuff, the tenant pays all the outgoings. So net
stress and
means
hassle.
it's all yours. Exactly.
Yeah.
Much less stress, much less hassle.
Yeah, and we better just cover off for the audience too that neither of us are giving financial advice or anything like that. We don't know your personal circumstances, all that. Make your own adult decisions and research, but we're speaking in general terms. And you're right. So the negative gearing obviously isn't a factor if you're getting it either neutrally or positively geared, which is the attraction of commercial property. So for the trades and construction-minded people out there, because that's our audience, how should they be thinking about some of this stuff that's happening right now?
Well, it depends on their circumstances and what and where they're trying to achieve. So there's lots of possibilities with regards to if they're looking to invest. I would clearly think commercial is a better investment at this point in time and moving forward. The budget stuff, you've got to expect that it's going to get rolled in. However, if you look at history, there's a very, very good chance that by the time we get the other side of the next election, it'll all be reversed back to the status quo that we know now. Because historically, Katie brought it in and he had to pull it back. Shorten took it to an election and lost. Jacinda Ardern put it into play in New Zealand, and then I'm trying to be nice. The term I think of is had her ass handed to her, in an election. A landslide. Landslide is the nice word. Landslide against her, and it got reversed straight away. So you would have to, if you look at history, this isn't going to be around forever. So if you've got a long-term hold horizon on the property that you're looking to buy, regardless of whether it's residential or commercial, you're probably not going to be in a different place. But
Mm,
the people who rule the land have said, we're doing this. So you have to plan around that. But I just
yeah.
think long term, it's likely to go back to whatever's here, but you need to have it front of mind. In the
Yeah.
interim, what do? If you have a long term view on property that you've currently got, I would keep that. If you have a
Mm,
short-term view and you're looking to trade it, you are probably going to have a better capital gains tax outcome if you sell before July 2027
yeah.
than what you are if you hold it longer than then.
Yeah. I suppose that you can never make long-term decisions based on what potentially is short-term, tax implications and so on. Obviously,
Yeah.
who knows? As you said, things get reversed all the time. That's the pattern that we can only assume will happen at some stage.
But the
You would
people that
guess,
do
you hazard it.
this, so
Yeah,
the people that do this deliberately quickly, try the people that buy flippers, for instance, buy a house, do it up, flog it.
yeah,
Um, the most effective way of doing that is through a company anyway. Otherwise, capital gains and rip it all out of you. You get 30 cents in the dollar as opposed to
yes,
50 cents in the dollar. So they're already using companies. And all it means is
yeah,
the people in the medium term are probably going to be better off using a company like someone who flips houses would, because
yes,
it covers a shorter time frame for making a profit. But if it's a
yeah,
long term goal, I wouldn't worry.
yeah,
By all means, you need to talk to an accountant as to what is likely to be the best holding entity over the long term or short term or medium term.
yeah. I
They're the
think the
best way
distinct,
to know what bucket to stick everything in.
yeah, and a little bit of the diversity never can hurt as well. If you've already got a couple of
Yeah.
resis, then you probably realistically should be looking at alternatives. And this is the massive advantage that I think small businesses have in that I guess the fear with commercial property is if you do have a property that's empty, it can be empty a long time. What if you're your own tenant? This is the massive advantage. If you're buying a commercial property and you can utilize it, rent it to yourself effectively, and then that worry is one less hassle. Do you see that playing out a little bit with
No, totally.
small business owners? Yeah,
Yeah. But just to step in, there's a few myths with commercial property. First myth,
yeah,
generalization that must have been created by residential agents years ago. But people think incorrectly that there's no capital growth with commercial. Rubbish. There's
yeah,
actually no difference. It's just there can be a time lag between when it kicks in, and I'll explain why in a minute. Also, people think you need a fortune to get into commercial property. Not true. I've bought really high performing little assets for 200 grand, 250 grand. You don't need
wow,
to be spending house money. You can be spending less than apartment money and buying, really high performance little starters for your portfolio.
wow,
The other thing is, so yeah, and long vacancy. Long vacancy does happen. We've all remembered that butcher shop that shut because with Coles and Woolies went crazy doing meat,
yeah,
etc. And it had a police sticker on that got all dusty and faded and all that sort of gear. But those, generally speaking, knowledge offsets risk. So you just need to have an eye on the market as to how how broad a specific space or building or property is going to have to the market. It might be
mm,
retail, for instance, is very versatile. It might be at the moment a restaurant, but the restaurant closes, but the space is still a really good space and a really good strip or area or whatever. It has plenty of foot traffic. Someone might come in and go, well, let's just put a lid over the grease trap, get rid of everything. I want to sell dresses here, and it turns into a retail shop.
yeah,
Then, so it's really about how versatile is the space and how broad is the appeal to the marketplace to that
mm,
space in that area. Same goes for industrial, you know. But
yeah,
what you want to watch with investments is things that are one off. Everyone wants a warehouse because everyone wants space, but a refrigerated warehouse, ooh, only 10%
right,
of the market or less than 10% of the market are actually going to want to use that space because
yeah,
the the fact that it's full of polystyrene means that the insurance is going to be a bit dearer because the insurance companies don't like polystyrene lined
Right.
places.
Yeah.
Plus, there's
Yeah.
refrigeration equipment that has to be looked after by somebody. Might be you, might be the tenant.
Yeah.
So that creates complexity, and B, the big issue is a much, much smaller part of the market wants to use the space. So it's about
Yeah.
using your noggin as to what you buy. I always say, don't ever buy a flour mill, because the mill is the only person that'll ever rent it to you, rent it off you.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. A bit of diversity, and to forward project what things might look like in a certain region and town. And do you find the cycles? I don't know much about commercial property, obviously, but do you find the cycles kind of follow the same pattern as the resi cycles?
Very
There's
much,
always
and follow is the
yeah,
active word. So two things to take into account. The commercial market is only 10% the size of the overall market, or sorry,
yeah,
10% the size of the resi market, both in terms of how many properties and what they're worth.
right,
So the dollar value of the residential fleet, for want of a better term, and the dollar value of the commercial fleet, it's about 9-1, 10%,
yeah,
9%.
yeah,
Therefore, when residential sneezes, commercial catches cold, to be sure.
yeah,
But there tends to be a lag, and the lag is about average lease expiry. So property growth and price growth is all about, regardless of what it is about supply and demand. So over time, demand and supply seesaw. And when you have low
yes,
demand, you have static price growth. And when you have high demand in relation to supply, pricing goes silly. So
yeah,
say you have this, the capital growth fairy comes through an area. You buy a house in, let's say, Australind, which is a new development, or a new newer suburb just out of Bunbury in Western Australia, which has had a pretty good run lately residentially. And I like Bunbury as far as commercial goes, because I like the city and the statistics and what it is. Western Australia is wealthy,
yeah.
and wealthy Western Australians, us East Coasters, we retire to the north. West Coasters retire to the south.
Really,
So
yeah,
Bunbury's a
yeah,
good place. But let's say they have really, really strong capital growth through this year. You will find, and for some reason, then the market cycle moves sort of somewhere else and it slows down a bit. You'll find it's like a window. It'll spend a bit of time ramping up while the window opens. It'll stay open for a while, and then it'll spend a bit of time ramping down as it closes, and the cycles move somewhere else for whatever reason.
yeah,
You will find that opening and closing is quicker, because the average lease expiry on a residential property is 12 to 18 months. Some people, sure, they stay there for 25 years, but the
yeah,
statistical average is much, much shorter than with a business. Business people are setting up business there. They don't want to destabilize their business. They want to make money. So some people like to grow, but a lot of people, and by and large, they want to stay.
mm,
So it's about 2 to 3 years is average lease expiry. And that's why it's about 2 to 3 years after the capital growth fairy's been through Australind and gone, oh, your house value went from 1 mil to 1.2 million in a year. It's about
yeah,
2 years later that the commercial will reflect that, because it takes 2 years for the landlord to be able to put the rent up.
yeah. Got it. Yeah, that
And when the
little bit
rent
of a
goes
lag.
up,
Yeah,
that's right. When the rent goes up, the yield increases. So when the yield increases, that adds capital growth to a commercial property. Whereas
yeah,
yield isn't part of the equation when you're pricing a residential property.
yeah. Yeah, that makes a whole lot of sense. And because the cash flow is neutral or positive, even if you do buy at the wrong end of the cycle, you're not. It's not. You're not going to sink in the meantime. Yes, you might
If
not
you
have
get it,
bought. Yeah,
yeah, if you get it wrong, you can still negative gear capital commercial property. It's not part of what just got rolled out.
really.
But the
Yeah, wow.
underlying fact
Yeah,
is, you have to try to be able to negative gear commercial property.
difficult to
There's usually
do.
a bit of
Yeah,
it's usually quite deliberate, because on its own, it should be able to wash its own face financially from day one. A
yeah.
very
Once
common
you've got a tenant in.
Yeah, common misconception is people think I'm investing in this house or whatever property, but generally housing. So I invest in this house. They put down a chunk of cash as a deposit. They get themselves a loan. They buy a house. All good. End of the first month, they've got to put in, the equivalent of $40, $50, $60, $80 a week to
Yes.
hold that. Well, that's not an investment. That's a speculation. Because what they're actually doing
Yeah.
is they're buying something that they have to keep throwing money at to hold their position in the hope that it's going to gain in value. What they're actually doing is betting on the gain in value. Whereas
Yes.
with a commercial investment, the idea is you put a chunk of cash in, end of the first month, bit of money comes back your way. That is an investment, not a speculation.
Yeah, that's nice. And it's good. That's why it's so good for your self-managed super fund as well, because as you're edging into retirement, you haven't got extra money to throw around like you may have done in residential property as an employed person. It's taking care of itself.
After a lifetime, and you're getting, a working lifetime when you're getting
Yes.
close to retirement, I think the aim is to have plenty to throw around and choose where you want to put it. It's certainly the hope.
Well, yeah, that's right. Yeah, and so with the construction people, trades people in mind, how should they start thinking about what we're talking about? So obviously that there's the potential. I think I said before they could buy something and be their own tenant, and that's one option. Or
Yeah.
if the numbers don't stack up as well in your region and town, maybe the town has vulnerabilities. Not sure. You can look elsewhere as well if you think the numbers stack up elsewhere, because you don't need to buy in
Absolutely.
your own backyard. Yeah.
So two things I do a lot, having been a commercial agent in the past. And it's things that I saw then, and it's still things that I'd say, hey, I've seen this. You'll have a tenant that has a few bob in their SMSF or wherever. Their business works very well at the site, but they don't like the fact that their rent is paying off someone else's asset. And they're like, hey, I could do this for myself. So the first question is, does your business is your business really comfy here? And if that's a resounding yes, because you got to think, if you move business, does your client come to you? If your client comes to you and you move, you're going to lose clients. End of story.
Yeah.
No matter how hard you try, you're going to lose clients. There'll be people you don't know are on your data, that they're the people that are in the mental database, not the one in your computer, that go, oh yeah, we know where to go to blah, blah plumbing supplies because they're there. And then they move and they're like, hang on, it's not there. You will lose clients when you move. Plus, there's a logistical cost of actually uprooting and moving and setting up somewhere else. And the administrative, like the difficulty of trading through that point in time. So there is a cost in moving. But what generally happens, more often than not, you go to the landlord, and the landlord's either an accumulator that doesn't need to flip properties and doesn't want to play, or the landlord goes, ooh, captive audience. And they get greedy and they blow the deal up. Sometimes if the person is approaching retirement, like the landlord, if they're approaching retirement or something, yeah, you can do a deal and they're reasonable, but it's not, it doesn't always work out that way, but it's not the end of the world. So if you can't, you just do what I call parallel investing. And that is, you take the amount of money that you would have used to buy this place that your business is quite comfortable in, and you use it to buy something else, possibly that is performing better than what yours would if you owned it.
Yeah.
You continue to pay off your asset to whoever your landlord is. You continue to pay off his asset with your rent. Someone else is paying off your asset with their rent. At the end of the day, you're in the same position or better. You don't have to move. It's a little bit like a commercial version of what they call rent vesting, whereby you rent your own
100%.
house.
Yeah.
Can't afford to live in Bondi, but I can afford to rent in Bondi. So I get to live in Bondi while I'm renting and build up a portfolio of residential houses around the traps in possibly cheaper areas. And then sometimes what they'll do at the end of that is, let's grab all our equity or sell all those properties and buy something in Bondi because we actually love living in Bondi, and all of a sudden we can afford to be there. So the rent vesting thing, it's the same idea
Works in
with
commercial.
parallel investing. It's a commercial version.
Yeah. And with how's the supply? Because obviously houses are a massive, the one thing that keeps everything ticking along in the positive direction for the most part, even in current circumstances, although Sydney and Melbourne are obviously struggling. The supply and demand issue with
Yep.
residential property has always propped it up. How's supply going in commercial? Does it depend on the location, or what's going on
Yes,
with that?
very much depends on the location. You
Yeah,
in your neck of the woods, my friend, commercial wise, particularly industrial commercial in the Geelong area,
yeah,
um, generates its own weather as far as price is concerned. It can, and it
really.
has been totally through COVID, since COVID, way in front of the same product in southeast Melbourne. You know, something in
Yeah,
Pakenham or versus something in, I'm talking industrial sheds, so that concrete box, steel roof,
yeah,
concrete floor, concrete walls, little office and some glass at the front. Very basic, same product,
yeah,
making much, much more money in Geelong. However, as we get to the top of the property cycle, or what happens, and we are at the top of the property cycle, what happens is land gets expensive. You know, land becomes a
yeah,
little bit so Bezos, and the people in the building game will get this. It's much, much harder for a residential development to FISO up. So there's lots of developers out there that can't get a job together or enough jobs together. And they know a couple of mates that have been building concrete boxes in
yeah,
Melton or Pakenham or, you know, whatever the area may be. But Geelong is, case in point, the pricing in Geelong been really, really good. So people are like, ooh, a little bit extra transport getting the concrete panels down Geelong Road. But apart from that, so your logistics are a
yeah,
bit dearer, but let's go and hit Geelong. Well, now
yeah.
we find a situation whereby Geelong's got a bit of a glut. There's a few too many developers, and a lot of the ones that are sitting on product are actually people that don't always do concrete boxes. They do housing, but they
Yeah,
haven't been able to get the housing to FISO. So it creates a glut. All of a sudden, the pricing, you know, levels out, drops,
yeah,
call it what you will. All of a sudden, it's harder to move. You know, 2023, 250-meter concrete um, industrial strata shed, you would have it sold before you had the keys. You know, they were
yeah,
selling off plan. Now,
yeah.
how many would you like? They're everywhere.
Yeah. Those cycles you got to be prepared for. I was talking to a guy. I won't mention his name, but he's in commercial in Geelong.
Uh-huh.
Must have been about might have been 6 months ago, 3 or 6 months ago. He was just saying how he was having his best time ever financially, moving properties, commercial properties, but he didn't feel as though it was going to last forever. He's been around long enough to know the cycles change, and so it's curious that you're saying it's kind of changing already in Geelong a little bit.
It's just a current situation at the moment. I
Yeah,
had been told by a few people that I know who had been sourcing stuff down there, and they'd said, "Oh, a bit of a glut in Geelong," and I'm like, "Really? I thought it was, you know, like Northern Gold Coast, like price itself into oblivion and still going full steam ahead." No, no, no.
yeah,
There's too much stock. There's too much stock, which isn't the case in the Gold Coast. The Gold Coast is a nightmare. I buy all over the
yeah,
country, so I have my finger on the pulse pretty well. So
yeah,
this was less than a year ago, and since
yeah,
then I've actually had people go, "Oh, I know this developer, and he's sitting on stock and he cannot move. You know, what would you do? Can you introduce, you know, can you
yeah.
introduce agents that are goers and might be able to sort of help this situation?" Which I have done. But it was like, yeah, very
Wonder,
strange. I'm thinking Geelong's absolutely the cherry on the cake in Victoria,
yeah,
and that turned just because it was oversupplied over a couple of years.
yeah. Well, the population growth is anticipated to be pretty significant here. Obviously, the internal migration of Australia, Geelong is massive
I was
in that
just to
field.
jump on that. I was
Yeah,
yeah, the biggest, the most internal migration in this country for ages has been the Sunshine Coast, and only
yeah,
the start of this year or late last year, Terry Ryder hotspotting, he's gone,
yeah,
no, no, it's actually Geelong.
yeah.
More people moving to Geelong than anywhere else in Australia. So
Amazing, isn't it?
that that glut isn't going to be there forever. It's just a point in time now whereby supply has exceeded demand for a market
Yeah.
reason.
Is that partly because when some of these tilt slab type places, the
Mhm.
small warehouses, yeah, all of a sudden you have a massive amount of them because they all kind of get built and tilted, in the same time. Is that part of it? It's kind of like apartments. If you build a massive complex of apartment building, all of a sudden you got heaps of apartments hitting the market all at one time. Is that part of what's going on,
Yep.
or is that?
They go up a lot quicker than housing does.
Yeah,
They get, from DA application uh, into the council to here's the keys is a lot faster than, and
yeah,
you're not building one, you're building 8, 12,
yes,
30, depending on the size of the complex.
yeah,
I'm not talking about people just building one. Building one's probably even quicker. One
yeah,
500-meter versus 10 250-meter ones. But
yeah,
they're very fast to be ready too.
yeah,
So yeah.
yeah. That's
So
right. So that's what. Yeah,
is it the end of the world in Geelong? God, no, not at all. But just at this
yeah,
really good buying right now. If
yeah,
you're an occupier, you're someone that's renting something um, in the Geelong area and been thinking about using the old SMSF to buy your own place. Now's the time to do it because there's lots and lots and lots of developers that are sitting on stuff. They're paying money for it to sit there. It's a buyer's market very much, just for that
yeah,
sort of thing. Just at the moment, it's just one of those times. Like you said, does the market move around and in different places? Because it's far more at the moment a problem in Geelong than it is, say, in Melton or Pakenham or other areas where that stuff goes on. However, generalising, there is a little bit of oversupply in all those other areas as well. It's a little bit more concentrated in Geelong, that's all. So to the
yeah,
point where it's worth a discount in Geelong, it just means it's going to
mm,
take a bit longer to sell in Pakenham. Does that make sense?
yeah,
Same
yeah, for
problem,
sure.
not as bad.
And this is why people in my view, need to get advice around this kind of stuff because it's unfamiliar territory. And so the difference of making a poor choice and a great choice would be poles apart. I mean, people get it wrong in residential, but at least most of us, we live in houses. So we kind of know, and we know suburbs and we understand that to a degree. We know our own location at least anyway. But this is different territory for anyone, for anyone dabbling without expert knowledge. It could go horribly wrong and mess up your
Well, that's
financial
right.
future.
You know,
Yeah,
as I said before, knowledge offsets risk. If you want to buy something like that for yourself, really good time. If you want to buy an investment, you don't want to buy one of those because you're going to buy straight into oversupply, which is going to mean you're competing with how many other people to try and find a tenant because there's people that have bought these things as investments and they're sitting
yeah,
there gathering dust. So
yeah,
really good place to buy something for yourself, really bad place to buy something to invest in exactly the same property.
yeah. Yeah, I'm sure there'll be a lot of listeners just tuning in and thinking, yeah, this is something I want to do either, well, for their own premises, the
Yeah.
trades construction people need something, and there's a whole lot of benefits to own it yourself. As you said before, you don't have to own your own; you can own something else. Um,
Yeah.
what are the ways in which you support? Obviously, you've been so generous with your advice and tips and so on. How do people sort of find out or engage you potentially?
Well, it's a InvestWise property. It's usually people will come to me through my website. Starts off with an email. I answer it with a phone call very quickly, and it's really just a chat to see who you are, where
Yeah,
you are, where you'd like to go, and whether I can see a way forward, whether I'm the right person. And the most common scenario is because it just starts with it starts with the chat. I'm not
yeah,
much of a salesman, but I'm a good agent. So how that works is, how you going?
yeah,
Um, well, do you have finance sorted? No. Do you have any idea what sort of structure you'd think about buying a property in? No. Okay, cool. So how good's your accountant? Good or bad, either, it doesn't matter. So
yeah,
get the accountant sorted. Either I can point you in the direction of one that can help you, or you go and talk to your own. Finance. Do you have a broker that does commercial stuff? No. Okay, fine. I'll put you in touch with a broker that does commercial stuff. Once they're ready to go, and that takes, a week, 6 months, 6 weeks, whatever. Well then, okay, now we know what you're capable of. Do you want
yeah,
to stretch to that limit? Do you want to keep a bit of gunpowder dry, and
Yeah.
what are your long-term goals? And then we work it out. I don't particularly go looking for offers, or people often say, what's hot at the moment? Industrial, retail, Queensland, Western Australia, Melbourne. Answer's yes. Because what I
Yeah.
do is I go looking for hot deals. It's not about the property, it's about your money. You want to
Yeah.
give me a chunk of money, or you want to give the bank a chunk of money to deploy, or I deploy it into the marketplace, hoping to get as much benefit with as much safety as I can. And there's so many different elements, like talking about Geelong and a little oversupply just at the moment. You need to be aware of what's going on in the market. So what I said with knowledge offsetting risk, I know what's going on in the market. So hopefully I can offset those sort of, oh, whoops,
Yeah.
bought the right property at the wrong time. That'll
Yeah.
you on the ass,
Yeah, for sure. It's not something you want to play around with on your own terms, I don't think. But the one thing that sprung to mind, and it's neither of our core, it's knowledge, but the getting finance. How does it stack up compared to someone going out getting a home loan? Is commercial property any different, or how does
It's a little different.
Yeah.
I mean, you buy a house, buy a factory, right? You have a property, you have land, and you have finance. At that point, the similarities end.
Yeah.
Particularly if they're an investment, it's a little simpler if you're buying for yourself, for your own business, because you don't have that due diligence that has to be done on your tenant, because that's in investments. Commercial investments are really what I do the most of. And the first thing we need to do, we're actually buying the lease. So I need to go in and look at the lease. Your question was finance, a bit bigger deposit, and the rent is really seriously looked at and taken and viewed in your favor by the bank. Whereas you have a smaller deposit for residential, and they don't give a toss about the lease income. All they want to know is how much you earn.
Really?
So
Yeah.
it's all
Okay.
about
That's
your
very different.
serviceability. So those two things make a big difference. You cannot be in a very strong position financially because you've got a chunk of cash or equity, but you don't earn a whole bunch. But you find a commercial investment that has a ripping lease, the bank's going to take notice of that and not worry about the fact that you're not going to be able to service it. It's all about the tenancy. So if they see safety and security in the tenancy, and it's got shitloads of income, pardon my French, off we go.
Yeah,
So
without protecting their interests
big
makes a whole lot of
differences.
sense. Yeah.
Correct. And that's not offsets risk again. A guy who specializes in, not occasionally does a commercial deal, is going to be a better broker than one that does, house after house after house, and then occasionally does a commercial because his residential client wants to buy their own factory.
Yeah.
He's not going to get the job done as slick as someone who does commercial stuff all the time.
Yeah. And even
just a
just
bit clunky, that's all.
Yeah, even the power of having expert guidance to negotiate the deal, you probably potentially save back the fee and plus some anyway.
I've never
as well.
on a commercial deal, one residential deal that was the customer was madly in love with the property. The vendor was not going to budge. I couldn't get anything done. I did a little bit of horse trading and got them some value in a different way. But that was a resi deal because the client fell in love with the house and came up with the stone wall. But as far as commercial is concerned, I have never bought a commercial property whereby both me and the client couldn't see value well in excess of what my fee was.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it.
You're buying speed, and you're buying safety, and you're buying there's a lot of things that I bring to the table, and look, I'm not the only one that does this, but professional help is well and truly worth it when making these sort of decisions. Getting back to what I was saying before about tenancy, with an investment, that's the first thing that you're buying. So it's all about how long's the tenant been there, how well do they fit the business. Does the business look like it has long legs in the world? Are we buying a Video Easy store? So we've got to look at that as well. And how long do they look like they want to be there? Do they have a lot of options lined up? They're in a one lease term, but they've also got another 5 years and another 5 years after that. So
Yeah.
it's all about the lease and the tenant first. When you're buying an investment, the building comes last. It is the last thing
Yeah.
we look at.
Yeah.
Because
That
we
makes
need to
sense
make sure it's
because, yeah, you see businesses that are never going to move. Like, I don't know, the fast food chains, probably some of them own their own properties, but those things never going to move, the fast food outlet. So if you can own the building, you're secure for it. And it's a really solid, viable business. They're never going
Yep.
anywhere. So,
And the banks
pretty
are very
safe.
much on board with that. So that's what I was
Yeah.
that gets back to what I was saying. You're not going to have the really super safe and secure stuff. Market forces will mean that the yield will be lower. You put a
Right.
factory
Yeah.
up at a portfolio auction where you've got a heap of stuff on the one day. You put a factory up that's got a good solid tenant that's been there for years. Sorry, and you're probably going to get a 6 to 6.5% net yield in a capital city. Whereas
Yeah.
same city, round the corner, McDonald's store, you're going to get 4%.
Yeah.
So
Because you've got to pay a
those sort
premium
of
for that
things,
quality. Yeah.
correct, for the
Yeah.
security.
Yeah.
So
That makes sense.
those sort of
Yeah.
assets tend to be places where people park big chunks of cash because they need to protect the big chunks of cash. Are they going to grow in value at 1,000 miles an hour? No, but they're not going to lose value. And that's the
Yeah.
motivation for dropping big chunks of cash. Therefore, they're not lending very much. It's not a deposit. These things are usually paid for outright. So it's a
Right.
4% safe haven for a big chunk of cash, not the sort of
Yeah.
thing I buy for mum and dad investors.
Yeah, that's right. And the way inflation is, you want to get a good yield
Right.
and obviously growth as well, to even just to stay equivalent to what your money's worth right now. You need a pretty sizable yield.
Yeah.
Stay in
I saw
front.
a KFC store go for less than 3% when interest rates were 4.5%. I'm like, why would you do that? Why
Yeah.
on earth would you
Yeah.
do that? But it's
Yeah.
that safe haven mentality. I spoke to an
Yeah.
institutional buyer, and he's like, there's different reasons people buy property. And
Yeah.
particularly, very, very mega rich families or offshore or whatever, they're looking for asset protection. They'll have an
Yeah.
element of their pool of funds where they're happy to have a bit of a crack, but they have big areas where they just want to make sure that their cash doesn't diminish.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Just
they're
hedge
the
them a little bit.
buyers.
Yeah.
Yeah. Whereas
Yeah. You want to be
dealing
wise
with
with all that.
mums and dads and small business people and stuff, I'm trying to have a crack and make $1 for people as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Of course. This has been brilliant. Thanks so much, Cameron. And you mentioned how to get a hold of you. So the website I'll put in the show notes. So what was the website again, so people can find it?
www.investwiseproperty.com.au.
Awesome. Yeah. So I'll put that in the show notes. Everyone can find it easy. Any parting words? Anything we should have covered that we didn't?
My phone number is 0427 007 009. But as far as, didn't we covered a lot of stuff in just under 40 minutes. I think we've done very well.
Yeah. It's been brilliant. It's flown by. You always know it's been a good conversation when it feels like it flies by. Thanks so much.
There you go.
See you again.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to Built, Trusted, Chosen. Brought to you by Uplift 360. Visit uplift360.com.au